need a smart platform to make sense of their workforce data to retain talent, eliminate manual work, and facilitate data-driven decision-making without compromising privacy and security requirements. With the Equitable Analytics platform, business leaders can ensure a sustainable and equitable workplace without impacting their bottom-line profitability. Our flagship features include financial planning for addressing pay and opportunity gaps at your organization, sustainable workforce planning with skills as a foundation. The Equitable Analytics engine takes the internal and external data as inputs and processes them to produce real-time insights that add value to your business. We democratize people analytics for HR. By partnering with Equitable, businesses can bridge pay gaps and retain key talent, transition to a skills-based organization to ensure an equitable workplace, proactively achieve your sustainability goals, comply with pay transparency, and pay equity legislative requirements around the world. Partner with us to transform into an equitable organization.
Welcome, everyone. We're super thrilled to have you join us. By the way of introduction, my name is Hamza, and I'm the CEO of Equitable. We are a tech startup, as you have seen. We specialize in creating bespoke HR analytics products that enables businesses of all sizes to efficiently do their financial and workforce planning. Our flagship offering enables companies to measure, achieve, and sustain workplace equity by facilitating pay gap analysis, pay equity audits, skills analysis, and sustainability reporting, and so on. We work with large corporates, small and medium businesses, and tailor our products according to their unique needs as well. So we've got an awesome lineup of panel members waiting to share their professional experience and thought leadership. So without further ado, let me introduce our keynote speaker. She's a lawyer, a futurist, and a passionate pioneer unlocking new opportunities and aspirations to make work better for humans and humans better at work. With more than 20 years cross-industry and global experience in IT service, total talent management, leadership development, human capital advisory, she works with businesses and governments to reimagine future vision and realize the new value that the lightning-fast advancements in AI and tech innovation can create. She's based in Tokyo and is Deloitte's Global Future of Work leader, and she's especially passionate about multilateralism and the need for collective action across governments, private sector, and civil society to create a more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive world of work. We're excited to have you, Nick Scoville-Williams, with us. So over to you, Nick.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Hamza. Hello, everybody. It is such a pleasure to have the opportunity to spend this time with you all today, engaging in what I believe is such an important conversation. What I have the privilege to do here today is to, first of all, set the stage. We're going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to look at the trends that we explore in our Deloitte 2024 Global Human Capital Trends Report. They are the trends that we see to be transforming the future of work. The trends that are impacting the choices that we all need to be thinking about and acting on to unlock opportunities and new aspirations to pave that path for a more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive world of work. After I've shared with you what those trends look like, then we'll dive into the panel discussion where we'll more deeply explore the opportunities, the new aspirations, with a special focus on the role of people analytics in achieving workplace equity. But anybody that knows me knows I need energy. I need everybody in the future of work frame of mind for this conversation. So what I'd like to do is get you all to just quickly share, what does the future of work mean to you? What are your hopes when you think about future possibilities? What are your hopes in this world of work for today, tomorrow, and beyond? Don't overthink it. We've got limited time. I want to get you to the panel discussion sooner rather than later. Just whatever comes to mind, just to get us all into that future of work frame of mind. So let's have a look and see what everybody is thinking, I know what I'm hoping to see, but let's see if you actually deliver on what I'm hoping to see in the word cloud. So we see equal, we see sustainable, we see human. Now, I'm sure that more of you have got things to share. Fair, peace, hybrid, opportunities, humanity. Yes, bridge builder. You know, you can see here the words. Look at the words that we're starting. Growth mindset, hybrid, equal opportunities, equity, humanity. The words that we see here are all words that connect to what I call human outcomes. And you're going to hear me talk about human outcomes again and again and again and again. But an important human outcome is progress towards equity, what we're really going to be focusing on today. So fantastic to see that we're all aligned in what we are thinking about, how we see this conversation that we are having today as being center of the stage in our hopes and fears for what's ahead in the future of work. So let's dive in. Now, hopefully, many of you are familiar with our 2023 Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends Report. And in that report, we started to introduce this notion of a boundaryless world of work, where we can no longer manage work and workers just through the construct of jobs, where many of our workers are no longer on balance sheet employees doing most of their work in an on-site physical environment. Since that time, we have seen this boundaryless world of work continue to evolve. We have seen the shifts that are impacting this boundaryless world continue to accelerate. For example, in Singapore, we now have 86% of all professionals saying that they plan to leave their job this year. That has increased from 70% just 1 year ago. That acceleration of the shifts. So this year's report is all about continuing to explore this boundaryless world and the acceleration of these shifts, with a special focus on what is it going to take for organizations and for workers to thrive in this boundaryless world of work, where we have this perpetual disruption, whether we are talking about lightning fast advancements in AI and technology innovation, or uncertain global events, or elevating concerns over well-being, mental health, and equity. The disruption is the reality. And as we highlight on the next slide, we have heard loud and clear that boundaryless work is here. It's here to stay. And we know it's no longer hypothetical or optional. We need to navigate this boundaryless work. We heard loud and clearly from our 14,000 respondents across 95 countries this year. They ranged from board members, C-suite executives, voices of workers, business leaders, HR leaders. They all told us the more boundaryless work becomes, the more important the human dimension, human performance becomes. Now, as you'll see on the next slide, when we look at what is happening, we see this very alarming knowing versus doing gap. Organizations, leaders telling us, knowing and understanding these trends that are shaping the world of work that we need to address right now. That's not the problem. 74% tell us we know what's going on. We know we need to act. But only 10% say we are doing something about it. We are making meaningful progress in addressing these trends. So leaders, organizations telling us we know human performance is the key to bridging the gap between knowing and doing. And that closing that gap is going to need more than just new mindsets. We need to leave behind the mindsets, the operating constructs, and the proxies of the past to be able to unleash a future full of hope and possibility in this boundaryless world. Now, really exciting and important is the new equation for human performance. You see here, the first thing that I must highlight is this equation puts human sustainability on the center of the stage. We define human sustainability as the degree to which an organization creates value for people as human beings, creating value, creating human outcomes, leaving people with greater health and well-being, stronger skills and employability, better jobs, opportunities for advancement, progress towards equity, increased belonging, heightened connection to purpose. And we know we could go on and on and on, but you can see that definition of human sustainability. It embraces those human outcomes. Those human outcomes include what we're here to talk about today. How do we progress workplace equity? Importantly then, our equation for human performance is about human outcomes combined with the business outcomes. So the business outcomes are things like customer satisfaction, the NPS scores, profitability, growth, innovation, speed to market. The combination of human outcomes and business outcomes, both of which can have a multiplier effect on each other in a mutually reinforcing cycle, is the way that we unleash human performance. You see down the bottom, the opportunity, the impact that organizations are achieving when they are embracing this new human performance approach. Human outcomes, business outcomes, mutually reinforcing cycle. 1.75 times more likely to achieve those desired business outcomes and almost twice as likely to achieve the positive human outcomes. So, with human performance as the theme, our report this year explores 8 trends. We go through the way in which each of these trends connects to embracing and unlocking that human performance. We provide practical guidance for how to bridge that gap between knowing and doing and unleashing human performance. We first delve into the nuances of human sustainability, the relationship between those business and human outcomes that I've just talked about, which is the very essence of how we define human performance. We then look at the need to evolve beyond traditional productivity measures to be able to understand how well is an organization going in achieving those human outcomes and aspirations. So as we started to talk about a little while ago, we were mentioning measuring workplace equity. That is exactly a part of the conversation in going beyond the traditional productivity metrics. In Australia, for example, we have the most productive remote workers in the world, but they're also the most burned out. Traditional productivity metrics not telling us everything that's important and that we need to know. And in that trend, we also look at the new sources of data and analytics that are important to help us make that shift. Recognizing that trust must underpin any efforts to unlock human performance, we then look at the role and power of transparency, the way that transparency can help or hinder the building of that trust in a world where nearly everything can be transparent thanks to all of the technological advancements. Keeping on that thread of, looking at human performance, we then explore some trends that focus on how do we unleash human performance. We look at the lightning fast advancements in AI and technology innovation, how they are starting to expose an imagination deficit, and the way in which operationalizing human capabilities like curiosity, empathy, and providing workers with safe digital playgrounds to cultivate those human capabilities and practice using them are becoming exciting strategies to tackle that imagination deficit. Continuing the theme of empowering workers, we then look at the need to move beyond a single monolithic culture to embrace all of the diverse microcultures, all aligned to the one set of organizational-wide values to really help elevate and support worker autonomy, agility, and experience. Then we look at all of the shifts that we need to tackle to move human performance as an accountability for all, evolving HR from a specialized function to a boundaryless discipline that is integrated and co-created with the people, business, and communities that HR serves. And finally, in our epilogue, we bring it all together and we look at what does this mean to those that are leading in this boundaryless world, and what in particular to the new ways of working that are increasingly tech-enabled but must remain human-driven. On the next slide, you see the knowing versus doing gap across all of those trends is significant. A couple of things that I will highlight for you. First of all, the transparency paradox was the trend ranked #1 most important that needs to be addressed. It was also the trend that our respondents said has the biggest gap between knowing and doing. Secondly, our respondents in our research told us workplace microcultures is the most difficult trend to tackle. And then finally, when we asked our respondents, what is getting in your way? What are the barriers to bridging that gap? They said to us, internal constraints. It's all about capacity, capability, resources, investment, leadership alignment, bureaucracy, all of those things that have continued to hold us up in driving sustainable transformation and change for decades, highlighting again that this is about more than the mindsets. We need to get into rewiring the operating constructs and proxies. Now, really important for many of you joining from Singapore, just really quickly, if we look at the Singapore data, you'll notice on humans in general, I should first say, in general, the trends were very similar, but there are a few things to just highlight. For this conversation, notice we had 10% of our global respondents say that they are making meaningful progress in human sustainability. In Singapore, only 7%. We talked about the need to move beyond productivity, to look at how we're measuring things like workplace equity. Globally, we had 8% of our respondents say they're making good progress there. In Singapore, only 4%. So it was twice as ready when we looked at globally. But on the flip side, when we look at progress in creating those safe spaces, those digital playgrounds for playing and experimenting with technology to reimagine the future, globally we had 10% of respondents saying we make progress, but in Singapore, 13%. So Singapore was leading the way with that experimentation and embracing digital innovation. In the interest of time, what I will say is clearly work to be done. The call to action is there. What I want you to keep in mind and think about before we go into the panel discussion is when you think about what you can do to help create a more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive world of work, regardless of what role you may be, what your contribution may be. What one thing do you think you can do to help create a more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive world of work? And this is what we'll be able to really hopefully think of boundaryless more broadly. Yes, the ecosystem, business, government, civil society. You know, I mean, here we have Equitable, a startup, a fantastic example of engaging across the ecosystem and really unlocking these important conversations, driving new thinking, pushing the boundaries, value creation of employees, just like how we do for customers. Absolutely. More learning constantly, learn how to learn how to unlearn, challenge ourselves, ready to rethink, ready to reimagine. And I would say continuing to focus on that human performance. You know, let's leave that word productivity behind. Let's embrace human performance and position human sustainability on the center of the stage. On that note, oh yes, put human back into HR. Absolutely. And something that I just have to say before we go into our panel discussion is, I don't know about everyone here, but every and any conversation I'm having right now ends up in a conversation about generative AI. If you think about every single one of those 8 trends, every single one of those 8 trends is absolutely table stakes to realizing the boundaryless potential of AI. I'll give you a quick example that I want you to think about before we go into the panel. I was speaking at the B20 Summit in India at the end of last year. A gentleman came to me. He's an AI startup founder. He said, Nick, I need your advice. 6 months ago, I started my startup. I decided I needed to focus on the A team of AI experts. I'm paying a premium, but I know that that is my pathway to unlocking the market opportunity around generative AI. I've got the most phenomenal AI experts I've ever seen. But 6 months later, they're asking me every day what I want them to do. And before I listened to you, Nick, I thought the secret ingredient that that team was missing, that team needed to unleash that potential, was more AI expertise, more digital expertise. I now see the missing ingredient is the imagination, the creativity, unleashing the wellness, the inspiration, the motivation. I now see that that team needs talent that know the right questions to prompt the AI with, how to synthesize the results, how to interpret when the AI is hallucinating. So think about that. That highlights the imagination deficit. Then starts taking you into how do we create these safe digital playgrounds. Then starts taking you into we need microcultures to create the psychological safety. Takes us into the productivity conversation. How are we going to measure what we need to achieve? Takes us into the human sustainability. What are the outcomes, the human outcomes, the business outcomes? Takes us into the trust and transparency and. So as you are thinking about how can we create a very relevant, impactful conversation about human performance, about human sustainability, about the imperative to drive workplace equity, use generative AI as your platform if you need to, because it can be your entry to get the conversation that you really want to get. On that note, I'm excited. Let's dive into the panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. If there is one big key takeaway for me, apart from the generative AI side of things, I would definitely say we need to create value for people as human beings, just like how we would do so for like our customers, our shareholders and investors. So we're not only driving better human outcomes, but also better business outcomes. So thank you so much for that. On that note, let me introduce our awesome moderator for our panel discussion. Elizabeth Hugh, she's an experienced change and transformation leader and formerly regulatory expert based in the UK. She served as a board member and director of Thought Leadership for Women in Banking and Finance, a not-for-profit organization focused on improving gender diversity. She's launched the UK's first cross-sector research program with a gender lens, partnering with leading behavioral science academics at the London School of Economics, supported by the UK regulators. Liz is a friend and a strategic advisor for Equitable. Thank you for joining us today, Liz. Over to you.
Thank you, Hamza, for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed Nick's keynote, and I'm really looking forward to hosting the panel that we have coming up. We have an outstanding group with us today. We're joined by Nick, who you've already met, Savitha Nayak, and Sri Nanda. On our panel, we will be talking about true diversity, how to measure success, common challenges, and practical actions that you can take as DEI practitioners. I'll hand over to our panelists for a few words before we get started. Savitha, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience today?
Sure. Very happy to be talking here today. I'm Savitha. I lead DEI culture and talent in SUSE.
And Sri?
Thank you so much, and a good evening from Singapore for everybody who's joining us from here. My name is Meenakshi Nanda, and I am a mother, a LinkedIn top voice, an IND champion by heart, and this is something that I would want to continue for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. So please do send us questions in the chat function as we go along. We'll leave time at the end to answer them, or during our conversations if they fit in. So let's kick off our panel by talking about true diversity. Savitha, I'll come to you first. What is true diversity and how do you measure success? And in the spirit of today's event, what does people analytics data, how does it help you achieve this?
Yeah, I think if we look at DEI today, almost become fashionable. And most organizations probably look at measuring diversity metrics and looking at how the DEI success is. But in my opinion, we should ideally start with I as an inclusion. And this should become the foundation where every individual feels valued, respected, and empowered. And every individual, where we are creating that safe place where every individual can thrive and be their best. And once we do that, the next step, I believe equity is all about how do we use it as a guiding principle, right? And how do we ensure that we provide the right platform, not the equal platform, but the right platform. Obviously, because we acknowledge and address how there are disparities, how people have different needs. And so how do we provide the right platform so everybody can thrive and be the best? And if we do these two things correctly, diversity should actually become a natural outcome. So if we really want to measure DEI success, in my opinion, we should be really looking at measuring how well are we doing inclusion, how well are we doing equity, and then we can really look at what is the natural outcome which comes out of it, not just measuring the diversity metrics.
Okay. And Sri, what are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Liz. I think for me, diversity and inclusion has always led to having that feeling of belongingness, because there are a set of people who are from different backgrounds, different educational levels, different years of experience, different gender, different walks of life. So everybody comes together to either co-create something in a professional space or co-create something in personal spaces. So for me, it's always been whether we are able to give them that safe ground so that people are able to voice out and share their perspectives. Because I mean, there is no right and wrong here. Anyone and everyone should be given opportunities, and ample ones, wherein they can express themselves freely. There should be no fear that I'm being judged or I'm, being looked at from a different lens just because I'm from a different country or I'm from a different race or I'm from a different gender. I think that feeling should not be there. In the absence of that feeling, I feel that organization or that space, whichever it is, has truly strived to be the best place to practice diversity. And because it is mostly about conscious inclusion. That's another word that I feel resonates with me when we talk about diversity. Yes. And when it comes to measuring the success, there are various parameters, and I feel there are various aspects of diversity that we would need to identify what is of importance to us. So, I mean, I'm an HR professional. I've been an HR professional for more than a decade. So, there are times when I hear leaders saying that, okay, let's focus on increasing the gender diversity. Let's focus on increasing ethnic diversity. Let's focus on doing something related to employee voice and engagement and the pulse. So there are different metrics. Are we going to measure wellness index? Are you going to measure where people are feeling more included in conversations, a seat on the table in everything that they do? And of course, are you measuring what is your diversity percentage? What is your retention rate, etc.? So yes, there are different parameters. It's for every organization, for each one of us to pick and choose what works best for us in terms of a focus, because we cannot be everything for everyone.
So, and when you're having those conversations, is it with the C-suite that you're having these conversations as to what are the values, how do you align with the values of your firm? What are you trying to achieve as a group? What do you want, what do you want good to look like in your firm? So is it those, as an HR or DEI professional, you're working with the C-suite to come up with that strategy that you'll then implement?
Absolutely, Liz. And I would say there are various stakeholders. Cross-functionally, you need to understand from top down. And I feel what has worked well in my experience is to also get a bottoms-up approach. It's important to know the pulse, listen to people, what exactly they want, what are their feelings, their emotions related to everything that we do. Because the HR team or the senior leadership team can come up with exhaustive plans and they can say, okay, let's do this in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, you tick the box. But is it actually leading to any sustainable impact in the lives of the people? Are they actually feeling that on ground? I think that is something which is important. But yes, to start with, leadership buy-in, absolutely important, because that's from where you get started. That's your starting point, of course.
Yeah. And Savitha, if I can come to you, globally there are differences in legislation as to what you can collect, what you can't collect. What challenges do you have when you're trying to collate this data?
Yeah. So first of all, before I answer this question, I would want to talk about, I want to add on to what Shri said and how we go about it, right? Because I don't believe that DEI should only be something which is just, the ELT or the executive buy-in. It's got to be, when I say DEI starts with I as in me, and it starts with every single person. And it's got to be bottoms up. And the way we do that is, how do we not just be open and transparent, at the leadership team and talk to people about what is all this about, what is our strategy, DEI strategy, etc. But it is also involving them and including them in it so that they are part of the solution. To give you an example, when we do, engagement surveys, what we do with that is go back and actually have various deep dive workshops where every single person we try to in the organization where we has a say, they will come into these workshops. We do this across time zones, across countries, across functions, where everybody looks at what should be the action should we be taking, what should we be prioritizing, what is more meaningful for them. And then we come back and say, these are the actions that we take as an organization, and we go about it. Now, when we talking about how do we start collecting data and how do we start looking at metrics, we actually consciously are thinking about totally not looking at metrics at all. Even looking at, should we be asking people, like a self ID, you can decide whether you want to talk about what is your ethnicity, what is your, gender, anything you want to talk about. But in a way, we think even asking for it, when you're looking at what may be very okay in one country, may be totally very sensitive in another country, may not even be legal in another country. So we actually decided that we're not even probably going to go with, asking for this kind of data, because that itself is discrimination. So we would rather measure things from what is, how are we doing on inclusion? How are we ensuring that everybody has a great voice? How are we ensuring that we are, it is our organization and everyone has a say in it, and how do we build it going forward? So that's what we would prefer.
Shri, is that an approach that you take globally that you've seen, or do you take a different approach?
So I'll be very honest, Liz. It's always been a mix and match throughout my career in the various organizations that I've worked for. So there are organizations wherein we are in a stage where we have enough data, enough structured data, the use of platforms and the support of technology to be able to capture a lot of data which can throw insights. Like if you want to look at wellness index, for example, what are the different parameters under wellness that you want to actually capture? Is it physical fitness? Is it mental and emotional wellness? Is it financial or social wellness? So there are different parameters. How do you kind of capture small data points here and there, and at the same time keeping the anonymity in place? Because never ever we've actually been able to have data which is exposing anyone or which is talking about any individual. So yes, we've had indices in place, we've had metrics in place. If you want to focus on diversity, yes, of course. What has been the early attrition in terms of the women talent that we are trying to bring in? Because we hire them, they are future fit talent, and why is it that they are leaving? To understand, are we doing enough when it comes to representing women profiles for niche roles which could have been conventional in the past? So we've played our ways, and we've seen what has worked and what has not worked. But yes, definitely I feel data and metrics, these two go a long way hand in hand in order to be able to show how the trend has been and whether things are actually working on ground or not. But again, it differs from individual to individual, organization. What is it that is allowed? What is it that is permitted? And whether we have the permissible tools and technologies. Because often more than not, we find that there are huge organizations, that is huge data. It's raw, unfiltered data. You don't know what to do with it. So it's important to kind of come up that, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things that we would want to focus on, and then narrow down what would be the data that you can filter out. How do you prune it? Do you take help from external experts like people from Equitable or people from any other place who are into analytics, who are into this space, and who have the tools and technologies? So I think it's important for us to do that, because in the long run, when the C-suite is going to ask you that, hey, you came to me and you asked me for this budget, or you wanted to roll out this survey, or you wanted to do this, what happened to that? So we are actually able to show them that, hey, it has been a 1.2x increase in this, or we've been able to get a 90% score in inclusion index. So we are talking data, and data really matters. Trust me. I mean, I know human emotions, of course, play a huge role, but it's a combination of both, in my experience, what I've seen.
And that's certainly what you were talking about in your presentation earlier as well, that combination of having the data, but also having that human element so that they can be creative and interpret that data.
Yes, and I think really, especially when you're trying to engage, whether it's a board or a C-suite, and Hamza highlighted it again earlier, ensuring you are really connecting the human outcomes with the business outcomes and that multiplier effect. When we're having conversations with those type of leaders and we're talking about well-being and mental health and equity, it can seem like a very nice, warm and fuzzy conversation. Then you start saying, in the US, 2023 alone, they lost 3 trillion on, lost engagement, productivity from workers that could not perform at their best, many because of not being able to along. When we look at the EU, over a half of lost working days every year are because of work-related stress, again, impacted by all of these things that we're talking about. So, but the other thing that I would highlight is my observations are we first need to really drive the communication campaign, because there are many organizations that have technology and are at a point to embrace some tools to get data, but there isn't the psychological safety and trust for individuals to share and opt in. And everyone here knows you don't get very far unless you're really in the intersectional communities. You really need to be able to have the trust of your workforce for them to see there's value in this for me. You need to be making sure that it's the workers on the ground telling you in their intersectional communities, this is my reality today. This is what matters to me. Without that listening and without that deep engagement and co-creation, we're always going to be suboptimal. And so I think these are the types of things that I'm seeing, a lot of how we're getting engagement with boards and executives is really elevating, bringing the granularity and getting to the point where it's actually the workers on the ground themselves helping champion the value of this data when they can see the way it's being used to create these more equitable outcomes for them.
Absolutely. And Savitha, that was something you were talking about, wasn't it? That education program of work that's required right across the organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's because as companies we are even we are making reports to boards, we are making reports and various kinds of data we collect, right? Whether to C-suite to look at, but then what is that kind of data we want to talk about? And most of the times, even boards today, they say, oh, how many women, how many minorities on the board? How many gender, what's the gender diversity on your director level, at VP level, and so on. And that may not be the right measure. And it may be and my question is, yes, we may have whatever ratio we have, but then so what? The true measure is not really looking at that and really looking at how successful we are in terms of inclusion and equity, creating the right equity. So it's really, it's education also, because the world somewhere have gotten fixated on this side of the D. And it's really doing that education and making people aware that, hey, it is not just that. Let's look at the other side and start looking at being more inclusive. And it all starts with each one of us. And how we need to embed this DEI every aspect of the way we work as an organization. And, starting from the time someone comes into the organization, or even before they come into the organization while they're still a candidate, what is that experience we create? And right up till they're with us, and finally, if they leave us, hopefully they keep coming back, because once they work in a place like this, they want to be able to come back. How do we create that right experience? So that is what we would rather measure than going about measuring, just say, oh, we have this percentage of people.
So it's quite a mindset shift and a change in operating constructs for leaders, as Nick mentioned in her keynote. Can you talk us through some of the challenges that you faced with C-suite individuals, and kind of what resistance do you see? How do you overcome that to kind of sell them the dream of this holistic approach rather than very much these three metrics?
Fortunately, I think SUSE is an open source organization. And we're an open source technology organization. So talking about this, to C-suite isn't an issue at all. Everybody, fortunately, believes in that very much. And so, but it's really how do we now ensure that everybody too understands that, and how we bring everybody together and go about it? So that's really what the challenge is, because coming from that open source world, it's easy for people to understand, yes, this is what makes sense, rather than just looking at ratios, gender ratios, or any other ratios that we're talking about. So that's been an easy thing for in terms of helping people understand. It's more of how do we actually make it happen too, because it's easier said than done to be able to start actually making it and seeing the fruits of it. That'll take some time, and really getting everybody onto it, which is where we're trying to do this very bottoms up approach. So it's not just the C-suite, it's not the people team, it's not the leadership teams who will do it, but as an organization, every employee has a say. And every, when I go back into every global all hands, we talk about, okay, these are what we want to do as an organization. And that would come in after we workshop with every single person in the organization as far as possible. And then we say, okay, we've all decided these are the actions. These are working fine. These we may have to tweak, and we keep going back. So that way we create that connection, we create that thing, and say, how do we do this together? How do we build this together? What makes sense for us?
Brilliant. And Shri, what other things? Oh, go on, Hamza.
Sorry, I was just about to add. There are a couple of questions from the audience,
Perfect.
and I just wanted to call out, in the interest of time, we've got like 5 minutes left, and if you guys are keen to answer the audience question,
absolutely.
So one of the questions is from at INCA, the IKEA. We have twice conducted a D&I survey based on voluntary and anonymous responses, and have indicative input on how included different underrepresented groups feel on various parameters. Would anyone else have experience with similar survey, or with self-ID correlated with engagement? So that's one of the questions, if you would like to share responses.
Shri, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'll be very honest. Inka, thank you so much for that question. And I feel all of us have landed on the same boat sometime or the other. So I guess what works in terms of an outcome of these surveys is to be able to narrow down to 3 or 4 metrics, or 3 or 4 focus areas wherein, we feel that we are able to create an action plan and work towards it. For example, if you are getting a score wherein your underrepresented teams, or there are certain segments, any particular business unit, any function, any country, wherein you feel the employees feel that the line manager is not very inclusive, and there's a little bit of bias, because there are tons of biases which line managers can unconsciously do, because that is also something which is a larger topic to deal with and discuss about another day. So probably the best thing would be to be able to zero down pick out those 2 or 3 important aspects you would want to focus on. Sit down with the important stakeholders with whom you can actually discuss what exactly can be done. For example, if you get an input that my line manager is biased, it doesn't give you anything that for what and why and how. So it's important to, kind of narrow it down, have those conversations, probably do some focus groups, understand, get to the root cause of why and how somebody's feeling like that, to be able to input something like that. And I think the best solution would be to be able to kind of have some line manager sessions as well, wherein we are dealing with unconscious biases, being more inclusive in our language when we are interacting on a day-to-day basis. So I think that could be one way. Yeah.
I think that's perfect, because there's another question around the line managers and the language around inclusion, right? So what are the tried and tested tactics for direct managers to foster inclusion for remote contractors who are typically engaged on a short-term basis, like less than 12 months and so on?
Savitha, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and I would want to add on to what Shri said too, right?
Okay.
In terms of what Inka is asking. First, well, as I said, what is underrepresented groups, which will be very different for different countries when you look at it globally, right? So I wouldn't even ask a question like that. Between the recent engagement survey, the questions that we asked was, do everybody feel included? Do they have a sense of belonging? Do they feel discriminated? These are the kinds of questions I would ask in general. And to see if there are, how are people feeling, right? So, like I said, we did wonder about, should we have self-ID? And I think it's something that we shouldn't be asking, because it is sensitive in different parts of the world, etc. On what questions, what is self-ID, what kind of metrics we want to capture. Tool isn't an issue, but the theme of capturing it itself, right? So so when we say, again, we're not making that discrimination, it doesn't matter, again, whether it's remote contractors, whether they're fixed term contractors, whether they're full-term employees, it's every single person who are part of that community. And when we say community, because we're an open source world, we have larger communities, partners, clients, everybody that we work with. It's the same thing that we have, and how we treat everybody the same. Everybody should feel included. So there's no question of saying, okay, you're a remote worker, or you're a short-term basis. It doesn't matter who it is, because there are different types of people who will work with us. And how do we create this whole community where everybody feels inclusive?
Yeah. Nick, I'd like to come to you. We've got 1 minute left, but I would like to ask you about, we obviously heard about the Global Human Capital Trends report for this year. I was just wondering what your thoughts are as to where this is going. So do you see this gaining pace? What do you see happening over the next 2 to 3 years globally?
Yeah, absolutely see that this will evolve fast. And there's a couple of signals that I find helpful. First of all, think about where we were, DEI very much only compliance. And it has taken decades to where now there are even organizations who are not so great at complying with the DEI metrics that they have to report, but they're doing great things on broader measurements, doing all the things we're talking about. So have kind of moved that way. Similar thing, look at what we're seeing when we look at climate action, and we're looking at, the conversations around sustainability from an environment perspective. We are seeing more and more and more and more government requirements to bring it in. So my hypothesis is that over the last few years, we have seen this escalating concern about all of those human outcomes that we've talked about: well-being, mental health, equity. I think we're going to see more and more pressure on regulations or reporting that is then going to trigger broader action. And I think we are going to see similar as to what we've seen on DEI, you know, going from compliance to more of a strategic agenda, I think we're going to see human sustainability follow that trend. And I think especially when we look at what's happening with the, you know, those lightning fast advancements in the tech and the obsession with the tech, we're going to realize without the focus on these human outcomes, human sustainability, we're not going to realize the phenomenal potential that the tech can create. So I'm very excited and feel that the path ahead is very promising given what we've seen in the past. I think we have to lead the charge. We've got to find the entry doors. We've got to drive the collective action. And the other thing that excites me is the workers themselves are demanding, are expecting more agency and being a part of driving this agenda. And so I think when we look at that opportunity to co-create together, it's exciting what's ahead for us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. It's clear from what we've heard today, this is an exciting period of change that requires both a thoughtful and a holistic approach. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to Nick, Savitha and Shri for sharing their knowledge with us today. The recording of today's event will be circulated via email to all attendees. Please do look out for more events from Equitable by following our LinkedIn page and checking out the website. Thank you from all of us and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day,
you.
everyone.